How do? Hi, I'm Chris. Welcome to King Bespoke Creations. Now then, we're a little bit frantic today, hence the still lockdown hair. Hopefully I'm getting a haircut next week. We're going to do some dovetails. Woohoo! We love dovetails. So we've done this one. We're going to show you how to do these. I'm going to do the half lap dovetails in a separate video because there's just extra little bits to that that's a little bit nuanced. Oh, I love that word, nuanced. Do you like that word? Give me a comment down below, your favourite word. Nuanced is one of my top of my list. So we're going to do some dovetail joints today. Very, very lovely, pretty joints. Really strong, actually. I can, barely flex that at all. So really strong joint, but very pretty. So we're going to show you how to do those. Lovely for making little trinket boxes and things like that. Right, so grab some wood and let's dive in and see how we do it. There we go. So we're going to do some straight through dovetails first. Now the first thing to make sure is that the end of your pieces are beautifully square, both pieces, okay, and are nice and square that way as well, okay. Yeah. Right, so once we've done that, once we make sure that our stock is square, we then just need to mark off the depth of our tails first. Well, I always like to cut tails first. There's a great massive debate whether you should do the pins first or the tails first. All we've got to do now is cut our tail pieces out of here. Now these are a wonderful thing. Just a bit of timber that I've made up to give me the roughly the right angle. You can do it in a 1:7, so you could take a marking gauge like this, measure 1 centimetre across, 7 centimetres down, and that will give you your angle as you go through like that. Okay. I do one of these because it gives me the right angle very quickly without me needing to grab this and change it every time. So how big do the dovetails need to be? Well, it doesn't matter, okay? Now if you look at factory ones, you'll find that every single one of them is exactly the same size. So what I like to make sure I do when I make these for myself by hand is to make sure that actually they might not be the same size. Especially if the piece is big enough for 3 or more, I'll try and make sure that at least the middle ones are different size to the outer ones to kind of prove that it's handmade for sure. Now I'm going to go in about 1/4 inch, about 5 mil, something like that, from the edge, and just with a pencil I'm just going to put a little mark on there, and I'm going to do the same on the other side, like that. And then I can go in from there, so it's going to slope in towards the wood. Okay, one on there, and then flip this over to get the same thing on that side. Okay, now you could leave it as just the one if you wanted to. Depends what you're making, whether it needs to look particularly pretty or is it just a physically structural thing. Generally, I would stick 2 in. So we could go again with that 1/4 inch in the middle. So the first thing is that we need to find that middle spot. So I'm going to get my centre finding ruler, and we have 32 on each side. So that's the centre, and I'm going to go a 1/4 inch gap in the middle. So we've got a 1/4 inch there, 1/4 inch in the middle, 1/4 inch there. It doesn't matter what size those pins end up at. Okay, that's completely random. So we're going to be flipping it that way, doing exactly the same on this side. And there we go. Right, so now we need to cut out these sections to leave us with those two tails. Okay, so can you see on there we've got two tails that we're going to end up with. We're going to cut out those parts. So now we're going to take that score line all the way around the edge. Okay, I don't need to bother marking off that side, because what I'm going to do now is take it to the vise. Okay, so the next thing is to make sure that we're going to cut down here perfectly 90 degree, completely square. Okay, so I can line that up, pencil line that one, pencil line that one. Now, instead of keeping going like this, because that's going to get wobbly, flip that over. That one up there, and that one up there. So now I'm going to take my my fine saw. You could do this just with a normal tenon saw. Just means your saw cuts are going to be a little bit wider. Decide whether you're going to go rough side or directly on the pencil. I would generally keep that pencil line visible, but for this point it doesn't actually matter. We could have just not bothered marking this and just roughly cut out the tails, because this will create the other side. Okay, so what we end up with here is what you're going to mark off on the other board. Down to that score line on both sides. Same on this one. See, that one went a little bit awry compared to the pencil line. I don't care. It's not important, okay? Because whatever we've got on here gets marked up onto that second board. Then we cut these end sections off, which is really simple. A little chisel for that, just to help keep that really neat shoulder line. There's our fine saw. There we go. So we do that side, and this side. Listen to the sound. There we go. Changes pitch. It lowers pitch the closer to the end of the cut you get. That's why I never do woodwork with headphones on. Right. So now we've got the issue of cutting this centre section out. Now, some people go in with coping saws and try and slot down there and turn it, and then try and cut across there and then have to chisel it out. I don't do that, because you have to chisel it out anyway. So I just use a cut to cut technique, like we did with the carving stuff. So get the knife mark in there, and then just go in with the chisel and just chip, flick it out, and as it gets deeper you can chop into that knife mark. Notice where I'm holding the chisel, it's not on the handle,
right down the bottom to give me maximum control of exactly where that cut's going to be. Light taps, doesn't need to be anything massive, and then back into slicing, just pushing that chisel in. With a harder wood, you might need to be tapping the chisel in, it might not push in as easily as it is on this scruffy bit of pine that we're just testing on. And just keep repeating that process all the way through. So you cut the knife line a little bit deeper each time with the chisel, dig it in to take some chippings until you're almost about halfway through. And then just flip it over and repeat from the other side. So we're trying to sneak up on that middle section. We don't just want to go pounding through to bash it out the way, because that's going to get you nasty edges that won't look neat and tidy when you're finished. Now, once we're getting close to halfway, you might feel that middle section bounce a little bit because it's got so few fibres holding it together. So just supporting it on a flat surface can just help us out just for those final few blows to just chip it out, and there it all comes. Now, just got to tidy it up in the middle. So here we go. Just pushing in, using the corners of the chisel so we don't have to put too much pressure on. You can really start where that knife mark was at the beginning and just glide your way in. We're looking to be pretty much flat. We can go slightly downhill to make sure there's no raised sections, but we don't want to do that too excessively or we'll weaken the joint, and the glue won't have as good a space to cling onto. So coming at it from both sides, again making sure we're not just going to blow out that far edge by doing it all in one go. So we're meeting in the middle, trying to make sure there's no raised spots, and the very internal corners are clean as well. So we need to make sure there's nothing proud on there. While it's at this point, again going in from the knife edge on the sides just to get rid of those furry bits from the saw, and that should help to give us a super smooth slick joint when it's all put together. So then we need to cut out the pin section. So again, like we did on the first bit, we're going to mark off how thick the wood is and how deep we need to cut. Again, feeling up the back, make sure they're really nice and flush, and then making a very light score mark with the knife tight up against just where those tails are, not all the way across for now. And then marking off where the tails go onto the other point. Using the side of your plane, knowing that the plane is beautifully parallel and square, just helps us line things up. So as we can sit there, we can get it flush on one side and on the other and on that front face, all just perfectly flush all the way around. Then carefully hold that in place, go in with a sharp knife right into the corner and make a score line along each side of those tails. Really making sure you're as accurate as possible at this point, because this is what's going to give us the best looking joint. And this is another point where we need to make sure that we're cutting perfectly square again. So we're going to use our little marking tool. We could do the square edge just as well, but just to give us that guideline to know that we are going to cut down, because you're cutting at an angle across the top this time, we need to make sure we're sawing perfectly flat downhill. Right, so here we're definitely going to be cutting on the waist side of that score line. It's all too easy with the saw to just slightly run over and end up with a bit of a sloppy joint. So if we go on the waist side, we can always then pare it down with the chisel afterwards. So now we can accurately put those score lines in. Where we put temporary ones in before, now we have score lines to go in between. So we can do that on the side that we've already marked. But then we've got to do the same on the other side. Now the way we're going to do that is to just put a tiny little nick in the corner on both corners so that we can transfer that over. Now those tiny nicks will disappear once we get the finished planing done, when we're done and it's glued up and we're ready to fit it to whatever we're going to do. But that just allows us to put those score lines in that are never going to be seen. And then chop and cut, chop and cut, chop and cut, flip it over, chop and cut, chop and cut, chop and cut. You get the drift. And again, just flattening off that bottom ledge where we've been chopping in from both sides, making sure that we don't have a lump in the middle that's going to get in the way. So at this point we can do a very quick trial of whether that fits, and no surprise that it doesn't. Remember that we haven't gone all the way up to those marking lines. You can see them there where the original cut lines were. So now we need to pare that down with the chisel, far more accurate than when we were using a saw. So quite simply, just getting that chisel, just slicing down, keeping the chisel really nice and straight, working it down to give a smooth edge. Anywhere you can see a knife line on the top, we can square down from it. And then it's just a matter of taking those sections off. Now you can do that with the knife, which works really well. Or you might just use the chisel and go into the corners, but really making sure those corners are clean. If there's any furry bits in there, like these little sections here, they will try and keep that that joint apart. So the cleaner your corners, the better your junction is going to fit together. And then we try it again, and this time it's looking a little better. Nice and snug, needs a bit of a tap to get it in. And presto, one dovetail joint.
So there we go. Not that difficult. It's just a case of being careful with your markings, using those knife lines wherever possible, and trimming down, always kind of building up to that line rather than going straight at it. Gives you the best choice. Practice makes perfect, right? But until then, sharpen your tools, and I'll see you soon.